Hey, it's Mark Podolsky, the Land Geek, your favorite niche real estate website, www.thelandgeek.com. And today's guest is an oldie but a goodie. He came, we haven't talked to him in, I would say, almost 3 years from the Best Passive Income Model podcast. But he was one of my favorite interviews of all time. That being said, I'd be remiss if I didn't properly introduce my co-host. You know him, you love him, Scott Todd from scotttodd.net, landmodo.com. If you're not automating your Craigslist and your Facebook postings, postingdomination.com/the land geek, and learn anything you want. Check it out, investorninjas.com. Scott Todd, how are you?
Mark, I'm great. How are you?
Pulse is still normal. Respiration's fine. I'm excited because our guest is one of those people. Like, there's always people in your life that when you leave the conversation, you just feel smarter. Some people make you feel, important. Some people, might make it like it could be an awkward end. But this guy, you leave, you just feel smarter. Our guest for the second time is Todd Tresidder from financialmentor.com. If you're not familiar with Todd from the Best Passive Income Model podcast, he's a former hedge fund manager, and he didn't want his tombstone to read, "His investment skills made his rich clients richer." As a result, he made his advanced investment strategy and wealth planning knowledge publicly accessible through his website to help normal people, the normals like you and me, Scott, achieve extraordinary financial results. The founding premise behind Financial Mentor is that quality financial education must be separated from the financial advice and investment product sales functions to eliminate conflicts of interest and hidden bias. That's why Financial Mentor is a pure financial education website. Todd is the best-selling author of 6 books and the Expectancy series of master courses teaching you how to achieve financial freedom so you can lead a more fulfilling life. Todd Tresidder, welcome back. How are you?
Thanks for having me on the show, Mark. And the writer in me can't help but do wordplay. I'm looking at the screen that we're all talking on, and I feel like where Scott Todd leaves off, Todd Tresidder begins.
There you go. That's right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
not often do we have that wordplay, so you got to run with it.
I am often called you. I'm often called Todd. So, we could be one.
People reverse your name, right? They'll put Todd the first name, Scott the last.
Yeah.
I still can't get his name right after all these years.
Yeah. Well, I was sharing before the interview, I got a brother named Scott, so it was just really interesting. But anyway, enough wordplay. On with the interview. Nobody cares about our names, right, Scott?
It doesn't matter. That's right.
So, Todd, just for the listeners that haven't heard the Best Passive Income Model podcast, let's rewind and let's just hear a little bit more about your story and how you came to be the financial mentor.
Well, when I came out of college, I wanted financial independence. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. So I had to work my way through college. I didn't come from bad things or anything like that. I mean, nice middle-class upbringing, but I had to work my way through college to pay the bills. And I really didn't like having to live from the right side menu of life. And so I just kind of said, well, if I'm going to have to work and I'm going to have to lead an economic life, I may as well design it to result in wealth. And apparently that's quite unusual. So I went ahead and started figuring out, how do you design your life to result in wealth? And 12 years later, I was financially independent. It's not that complex. It's not that difficult. You just have to get the principles right. And so then I started seeing, well, once I was financially independent, I sold the hedge fund. Or part of that was I realized I had to become an investment expert. And so I went in the hedge fund business. That was part of how I built my wealth. Sold the hedge fund in 97 and started Financial Mentor in 98. And it was just on kind of this crazy idea. The internet was just getting going back then. That's how I have the URL Financial Mentor. Obviously, that's hard to get. It was just getting going. And I had this crazy idea. I was like, I wonder if I can actually help people achieve financial independence. Like, is there a constructive, engineered, realistic, scientific way to make it happen reliably for people from different walks of life? And so I started one-on-one coaching people. I did that for 2 decades, broke it down into a systematic model, and now I'm building out the courses and the books. So basically what I'm doing now that I've proven it out, I know what it is, I know how to help people because I've tested it in real time. Now I'm trying to productize it, right? So I'm trying to put Todd's knowledge in a box so it's more affordable, because one-on-one coaching is not scalable and it's very expensive. And so I shut down the coaching practice, and now I'm putting this knowledge in product form, which is what you're talking about with the courses and books.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Scott, Todd, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think it's pretty cool. I think I think that, Mark, we run into this issue too, right? Like there's only so much we can do for our own selves or our own selves that bring us only like certain amounts of joy. And then you're going to get a lot more joy from helping other people, right? Okay, money might come, whatever, but
Right.
I think there's a level of satisfaction that gets missed a lot of times when you're only focusing on yourself, as opposed to little things or little moments that you can do to help other people to create or manufacture the life that they want. And I like what Todd said about, manufacturing the life that he wanted to be economically, beneficial or economically wealthy. So I think that that's really cool. And I like how he's giving back through his books, et cetera.
And by the way,
Yeah,
it doesn't
no,
have to be mutually exclusive either. It can be a good business model and give back.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true. Absolutely,
yeah.
that's true. And I think that's what we have.
Yeah, I mean, the premise is as long as you give more value than you take, then you're giving back, and you're growing wealth as a reflection of how much value you've given.
Right.
So they can actually be quite symbiotic.
Yeah,
I
go ahead, Scott.
I was gonna say, ultimately, that's what the world is really about, right? Like that's how wealth really is created, is by giving value. It's not necessarily about selling something for a top dollar. I mean, you can sell something for $1 million, but not give any value to it, and you probably won't make a lot of money. But when you add value into a transaction, or you add value into a relationship, that's really where profits are made, is value generation, not just selling something for $1 million.
Absolutely. When you think about what is value and how are you creating value, it's really the application of knowledge capital, right? Our knowledge, our skills, our resources, our personal resources, if you will, applied to physical capital. And that's ultimately what creates wealth, right? So you think about like the minerals in the ground are worthless without the knowledge capital applied to mining them and processing them and turning them into something useful that has value. And so the same thing, real estate is a chunk of dirt until you create value with it. I mean, what was Las Vegas? It was a pile of desert, and then suddenly now it's valuable real estate. So it's the application of knowledge capital to resources that creates value and creates wealth.
No, absolutely. And learning that specific knowledge does take time. It's just, you can't get it necessarily from a book. It has to be applied at some point. And it's one of those things that's like the fundamental basis of building wealth. But Todd, I'd be curious, we throw the word wealth around. To you, what is the definition of wealth?
It's funny you ask that, because wealth is not really the focus, right? Nobody actually wants more money. What they want is what they think money will bring them. And so I don't really actually go about defining wealth as much as I define financial freedom, which is cash flow exceeding expenses, right? And so wealth is actually, if you really think about it, it's the assets that produce the cash flow that exceeds your expenses. So if you're going to define wealth, it's probably the assets that produce the cash flow that creates the freedom. And so that's probably about as close as I can get to a definition. And it's never about, see, notice I focused on the term freedom. In my world, it's never about more stuff, right? In my mind, wealth is about experiences, not stuff. A wealthy life is a life full of bountiful experiences. It's not a life full of more toys and fancier cars. So anyway, I've got kind of a convoluted definition on it. In there, wealth fits in. It's the assets that produce the cash flow, but the real focus is freedom. That's the value we're actually trying to honor, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Scott and I 100% agree with your exact definition. We talk about this all the time. Money simply solves money problems. And what we want to get to is the point of solving time problems and money problems. And once your passive income exceeds your fixed expenses, you get both of those. And then you can really think about, well, how can I add more value to my life in the experiences, giving back to others, moving up Maslow's hierarchy of needs into self-actualization.
Yeah, it was interesting because when you think about it, really your only limited resource is time. I mean, that's
Right.
the only resource that you can't replicate. You can't get more back. You can't do anything with it. You got a fixed amount of time, whatever that is, nobody knows. And that's your ultimate limited resource. Everything else is not a limited resource. And, when you're talking about like, what's the ultimate goal? To me, it's fulfillment. It's a fulfilling life, right? I don't need more stuff. I mean, you look around the office in this picture, it's a nice office. It's fine. I don't need more stuff. And so, I saw, there's a person who's going to be nameless because I don't want to throw names here. I was reading a New York Times article the other day, and it was about a very famous individual, successful capitalist. And he was being lambasted or being investigated, if you will, by a New York Times reporter for having incorrectly used the privilege, what is it, opportunity zones, where he was using, he was using political favor to get certain areas designated as opportunity zones that he already owned in order to get tax benefit out of them. And I had to laugh. This individual's in his 70s, and he has more millions, actually billions, than he can ever spend. And he's sitting here trying to get more wealth at the expense of taxpayers and at the expense of the public dole. And for what? He couldn't spend it all in his lifetime, and he has very limited time remaining. Why is he spending his time on such things? I just looked and I thought, how preposterous. Like that, you have to be so in love with the game and winning the game that you lose all sight of how it even relates to your life in order to want to do something like that. It was just bizarre. Anyway, it just ties into our conversation. I just thought I'd share it.
No, I'm really glad you shared it. Scott, what's on your mind?
No, I was going to say like that is to me, it's like, you're right. They're so in love with the game of wealth or wealth creation that they're willing to do whatever it takes to get it. It's almost like a greedy mindset, if you will, right? Like I'm going to get everything I can, and for what purpose? And I mean, I don't know what individual you're talking about. I can go look it up, but essentially the reality.
I really didn't want to name names, right? Because that's not the point. It's the principle, right?
Yeah. No, it's okay. I don't blame you at all. Like, I think that the challenge there for that person is it really kind of just shows that they probably don't have an abundance mindset. And we see that a lot more too, is that people, they don't have the abundance mindset. They think it's really just, going to evaporate on them if they just give, and then they hold and they take.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious, Todd, how do you help somebody that grew up hearing money doesn't grow on trees? They're kind of in that scarcity mindset. And then you need to sort of walk them through this path that, okay, you've got to take some of this money and invest it. And when you invest it, you're taking intrinsically some risk with it.
Yeah, you're deferring gratification. You could spend it now or you can invest it for the future. So it's deferred gratification, which is a mature viewpoint that not everybody carries.
Right. So how do you help somebody kind of walk them into this abundance mentality? There are no limited resources really except for your time. But so many times we'll look at our paycheck and be like, well, no, Todd, this is a limited resource. I worked this many hours. They took this out of taxes. This is what my net is. Come on. I've got to,
So is that true, Mark? Is it really true that that's how the economic game works in any other situation than just a W-2 income? How is it that, given that framework, that you can account for somebody that becomes a multimillionaire in their 20s? What is the difference? So if you notice in my reply to you, I pretended you had the question, right? If you notice in my reply to you, I didn't directly take that on. What I'm doing is I'm allowing you the space to think it through and decide what's true and not true for you. One of the first rules you learn in coaching is you can't make anybody do anything. And you have to get really clear on that. You also, one of the things I've really gained, it's one of the great gifts I got from, 2 decades of coaching, is, really almost no judgment. I mean, I can't claim I'm superhuman. I have no judgment, but it would be like I wouldn't be attached to this person having any specific realization. But what I would do is I would be aware of how I see it is different from how this individual sees it, and how one belief structure may be serving the objective and another belief structure may be taking away from the objective. So if you have a scarcity mindset and you want abundant financials, you're going to have to look at what's serving you and what isn't, and decide what you consciously want to accept. See, the beauty of the human mind is it's malleable. And so you can shape it to whatever purpose you want. You can shape it to evil deeds. You can shape it to good deeds. You can shape it to abundance. You can shape it to scarcity. You can shape it to wealth. You can shape it to poverty. And different thinking patterns will result in different outcomes. So for example, early on in my coaching career, and I didn't do this later on, but in the early years, I accepted both get out of debt clients, which are in abundance, by the way, and how to build wealth clients. And I remember one day I was struck because I was going back-to-back calls for some reason that day. I had 4 back-to-back calls, and it went wealthy client, poverty client, wealthy client, poverty client. Oops, almost knocked my tea over. And so I'm going this back-to-back clients. And by the end of the day, I'm realizing, I go, wow, that was really mind-numbing. They are direct mirror opposites in their belief structures. And here they've got this mirror opposite financial result they're producing in their life. And I hadn't connected the two before. So like, for example, wealthy clients have a tendency to come from a position of self-responsibility. Now there's a reason, and whereas debt clients tend to be victims, they tend to come from a position of victim, that it's somebody's done this to them, right? And it's really, you led up with that, almost like the position you were taking was almost a victim position. It was not an empowered question. It was a victim question, right? So wealthy people tend to come from self-responsibility. Victims or poor people come from victimhood. Now, here's the funny thing, okay? When you come from self-responsibility, it's not always true, right? Not everything that happens in your life is your fault. You're not actually responsible for it, but it doesn't matter. You need to come from the position of self-responsibility because that's what's empowering. That's what gives you control over your life and gives you the ability to shape your life in the direction you want, is by assuming it's all your fault, assuming that you're responsible, that placed yourself in these situations, no matter how much you have to stretch it, because otherwise you're not in charge of where you're going to take your life, right?
No, I love it. I love it. And it kind of leads up to a follow-up question to that, because if I had to bet, I have a sense that you have a set of principles that you live by.
Totally.
So if we had to go to the top 5, I bet self-responsibility is in there. What would be the other 4 principles that you live by where you can directly say, because of these principles, I live a wealthy, fulfilling, meaningful life?
Okay. I'm going to have to make it up off the top of my head. I'm probably not going to be able to give you 5. Okay. Cause I don't have it all figured out on a sheet of paper. Like these are my guiding principles, like Ray Dalio or something. But let me go through a couple here. One of them is I have a high value on growth. Okay. So I'm always growing. I'm always trying to move my thinking. Here's one that's really important. I'm always trying to move my thinking, what I call level 2 thinking. Okay. So level 1, an example of level 1 thinking, let's use diet because we're all familiar with it, right? Level 1 thinking, diet, it's like a checkbook mentality. Calories in versus calories out, net is weight gain. Okay, that's level 1 thinking. That's old school. Okay, level 2 thinking is understanding your body's a chemistry experiment. There's all kinds of things going on with how your body metabolizes energy, how it stores energy. There's all kinds of other mitigating factors like sleep cycles and body chemistry. It's way more than calories in, calories out. Calories in, calories out is oversimplified. Same thing like in paper asset investing. Level 1 thinking, buy and hold, low cost passive index. Level 1. Level 2 thinking is understanding risk management, understanding the role of active risk management when it's properly done. There's a lot more to understand about investing than a simplistic view like that. So one's level 1, one's level 2. Level 1's usually simplistic, oversimplified, and it's usually just close enough to reality that it passes the smell test, and that's how it becomes conventional wisdom. Level 2 is dynamic. It's subtle. It requires more knowledge to fully develop and understand, but it's well worth doing because it's way more accurate in our world. It reflects reality. And so it allows you to work within reality way more productively. And so I'm very fond of level 2 thinking. I'm willing to pay the price to do it. I'm actually kind of passionate about it, as you probably hear in my voice. And I think that's been a huge source of my success, like at the ground of my success. Another one is being clarity of thinking and commitment. So people will say like, I'm amazingly disciplined, and I'm not, right? There's a quote out there. I don't remember the source, but it's basically discipline is just remembering what you want, right? I'm not so amazingly disciplined. I'm just very clear what I want, what I stand for, what I'm willing to do, what I'm not willing to do. And I'll make the decision very clearly up front. Once I make that decision, it's not discipline. I'm just doing what I want. That's what I want to do. That's what I'm creating. And therefore I'll stay at it until I get what I want, because I already thought this through well before I ever made the decision. So there's a couple there. I'll give you one more, which is integrity. I don't do business with anybody that lacks integrity. I learned that in real estate, actually, coincidentally, for this podcast. I'd never buy a deal from anyone where I could sense any lack of integrity in the books or in how they were representing the property. I will buy one blind, where they just claim as is, there's no representation, it's your risk, you've got to figure it out. I'll do that, but I'll never buy one where it's misrepresented, because I have a thing called the cockroach theory, right? Which is there's never one cockroach. You'll find one cockroach, you'll see the cockroach, but don't ever delude yourself that that's the only cockroach, right? The cockroach theory says if you find one, there's thousands more behind the wall. And it's the same thing when you're dealing with a dishonest person. It's cockroach theory, right? There's a parallel there that's not.
I love that. There's a great scene in this show called Ozark. And did you ever watch Ozark?
No. But go ahead.
Well, it's crazy, but it basically says about his aunt who got caught stealing from the register one time. Worked for his father for 20 years at the grocery store, but she got caught stealing one time. And he took a poll, like, what should I do? Like, oh, it's for one time. She's been here 20 years. Forgive. And he's like, this is the first time we caught her. It was the cockroach theory.
Yeah.
And so it reminded me of that.
So yeah, those are 3 or 4 things that came off the top of my head just without even really thinking it through. That's just what came to me when you asked me the question.
No, I love it. Scott, Todd, what are your thoughts?
I mean, but Mark, isn't it interesting that he was able to answer the question? I'm not trying to put Todd down. All I'm saying is that he has a methodology that he follows, right? And I like the elements of his methodology. I like digging deeper, if you will, instead of that surface level, knowing what you want and all the other pieces. But he has a formula that he follows, right? He knows who he is, honestly. And I think that's what a lot of times people miss, is that they don't know either what they want, don't know who they are, or they don't know what their principles are that drive them there, or his number one thing, which was kind of like to go deeper. They just take the top and they call it a good day. And I just found it interesting that he had the 4 that he had there, so that he knew to go deeper, and he knew who he was and what his principles were, because I think that makes a big difference in the world. Because, well, if you don't know who you are, you don't know what you stand for, you don't stand for anything.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Go ahead, Mark. Well, I was just going to say, I'll throw another one in. I just thought of another one while you're talking, Scott, which was systems and leverage. So I don't pursue any strategy or any business or anything unless it's a highly leveraged strategy or has the potential for leverage. I could work my way up to the leverage. And there's a reason for that. It's the only thing worth my time. Again, it comes back to the thing that there's very scarce resource of time. So even when I was doing the coaching, the business model was always intent on being a product-based business, assuming I could figure out how to actually help people, right? But I always knew the leverage was through the internet in building out a product-based business. That's where the leverage and the scalability in the business model was. That's why it was always founded on the internet from day one. And I used the internet to reach the niche markets to do the coaching, which was basically revenue producing market research, right? The coaching was basically revenue producing market research to develop the products and figure it all out and systematize it. And so and that's the other piece is I'm a systems guy, right? And again, it comes back to the one thing you're totally limited on in this world is time. And so systems replace time. So I'm not doing the same thing over and over again. So those are a couple more principles I'd toss in there.
No, I love it. Dear listener, if you simply write down Todd's principles, you have literally I can guarantee that in a span of time, you will be 10 times more successful than you would be if you didn't. Because when you take full self-responsibility, you have a growth mindset, you have level 2 thinking, and you look to leverage your time, and you're not ever going to get kicked out of the game because of integrity. Your success is inevitable based on that.
I'll give you another one. I just thought of another one while you're talking, risk management. And that goes back to, if we're building wealth, the game is your wealth compounds through expectancy, right? So expectancy is probability times payoff. And so payoff equation or probability equations are never knowable in advance, right? You can try to anticipate what's a high probability payoff, what isn't, but you never actually know. Whereas the payoff equation is the one thing you can absolutely control. And the way you control the payoff portion of the expectancy equation is through risk management. And so everything I do is built around risk management. I always say that if you're dealing with a money manager and the first thing out of their mouth isn't about risk management, then go find a new money manager, because you have to know how you're going to lose money, how it can happen, so you can manage against it to control the math of how wealth compounds. And so that's another just core principle, is that everything comes from risk management first. I'm actually really upside down compared to almost most people, in that I focus on how you lose money first, and then how much I can make is the secondary question. How much I can lose on a deal is always my first question.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. Scott, I told you we'd be smarter at the end of this conversation.
I mean, how can you not be, man? Like, you know, it's one that you don't want to end.
I know. Unfortunately, we are at that point in the podcast now where, Todd, your mentorship has been invaluable, this podcast. But now we do have to ask you for your tip of the week, a website, a resource, a book, something else actionable for the Art of Passive Income listeners to go improve their businesses, improve their lives. What else have you got?
Well, I don't know if this is even allowed because it's my book, but it plays into what we were talking about, which is leverage. I think everybody listening should ask themselves, this is another principle, right? It ties into what we're talking about, which is ask yourself, how much leverage are you applying in your life? Most of these listeners are, because this relates to real estate, will be masters of financial leverage. But there's other types of leverage. There's 4 other types of leverage. And so you want to look at how much leverage you're introducing at every level of your life. And so that would be a tip of the day, if you will. Tip of the week is to think through that. And I do have a book that teaches that, which is The Leverage Equation. And what's funny is it's one of my favorite books, and it's not very popular. A lot of people don't get it. It's popular in the entrepreneurial crowd, but the finance crowd doesn't get it at all.
Interesting.
And I think it's like the core to wealth building, because again, it ties back to the expectancy equation and how you tilt the payoff portion of the expectancy equation. And the positive tilt is leverage. The negative tilt that you avoid is risk management. And they're bookends. They're the opposite sides of the same coin. And so that's the tip of the day, is to really understand how leverage connects with risk management to build your wealth.
Yeah, I know. And the leverage equation, where can we get that?
Wherever good books are sold.
Wherever good books are sold. So Audible, Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, actually, I'm just in the process of recording the audiobook. So the ebook and the ebook and the physical book exist, and the audiobook should be out before Christmas, sometime around then. I'm working on it.
Okay, great. Because I like to listen on 2x and then read at the same time. So I'm completely immersed and my mind doesn't wander.
Interesting. I've never heard that. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So get that audiobook done. I know it's tough to do. I've done one.
Yeah, I'm actually receiving voice coaching, right? Because
you don't need voice coaching, Todd. You've got a great voice.
In an interview, I'm fine. But when you're reading a manuscript, there's a skill to it, and I wouldn't want the audiobook, I've heard them when they're done poorly and they suck, right? And I don't want to suck. So I'm being trained. I'm being trained to not suck.
Well, I mean, and I think that goes to principle number 2, which is growth.
Yeah.
So, which is phenomenal.
Always learning, man. Always learning.
Always learning. Scott, Todd, what's your tip of the week?
Mark, I don't have this problem on my Surface, but for those Mac users, I have to share this one. And I just put it in the chat as well.
No.
The Mac users, I did have this issue when I had my Mac. And you guys need to check out, it's called the bin, B-I-N, the bin, the trash bin for Mac. You load this thing, and one of my pet peeves on the Mac was if I dump something into the trash can, it still utilized my disk space. It was still there until I went in and deleted it. This thing is like, supposedly, I haven't tested it. Supposedly, it's like the Mac Daddy trash bin for the Mac. Makes your disk management goes away, saves you disk space, resolves annoying errors according to that. I don't know what errors they're talking about, Mark. Maybe you do. But you know, if you are looking for a better solution, there you go.
Well, I've got a program that I run that empties the trash for me.
Hazel.
Hey, well, no, not Hazel. It's what the heck is this thing called? I'm having a senior moment. But it's like I'm right now. I'm seeing my CPU usage, my battery, and then it says reclaim space.
Oh.
It's and it kind of shows you how to do it. It's from macpaw.com. It's like, but I'll get this.
Check it out.
Todd,
At least check it out.
use? Are you Mac or PC?
Oh, I'm a heathen all the way, man. I'm PC. You could not get me anywhere near an Apple product. I tried them before. My wife and kids are total Apple fan people. The whole household's Apple, except for me. I get on that stuff and it's like it's written in Chinese to me. It makes no sense. But see, you got to understand, I was programming computers in college. I was working on the first IBM PCs when they had the 8888 processor and they were like briefcases. They were so big. So, I mean, I've been dealing with DOS and everything my whole career. So to me, it all makes sense. I get on a Mac and it doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Well, look, I'm outnumbered here. I'm not even going to try to make an argument.
You can't do it.
But thank you, Scott, for a tip that us Mac users can use.
They need all the help
also,
they can get.
yeah, while also elevating your argument of the superiority of PC.
Thanks, Todd, for helping me with that one.
Anything I can do,
Yeah.
Scott.
See, Mark,
So-
you know what that is? That is leverage.
That is leverage. That is leverage. Well, Todd, it's always a pleasure seeing you, hearing from you, gathering your wisdom. I just feel so much smarter, and I know the listeners do as well. I want to just let them know that my tip of the week is learn more. It doesn't stop right here. Go to the financialmentor.com. I know that Todd likes his book, The Leverage Equation, but how much money do you need to retire? He's got a book there. The 4% rule. He's got a book there. Variable annuity, pros and cons, investment fraud. He's got a book there. Don't hire your financial coach. He helps you with getting help. So there's so much wisdom just at thefinancialmentor.com, and so much of it is free. It's it's the worst business model ever, Todd. But whatever. We'll argue about that another day. It is leverage, and it's been a pleasure as always. I would highly recommend, if you haven't heard Todd's original interview on the Best Passive Income Model podcast, just do a Google search, Todd Tresidder and the Land Geek, and you'll find it on the interwebs. And also, please, dear listener, the only way I'm going to get the quality guests like Todd Tresidder from financialmentor.com is if you do us 3 little favors. You got to subscribe, you got to rate, you got to review the podcast. Send us a screenshot of that review to support@thelandgeek.com. We're going to send you for free our $97 passive income launch kit course, as well as our latest wholetailing course, how to double your money 30 days or less on a land flip. Scott, Todd, are we good?
We're good, Mark.
We're good, Mark.
All right. Thanks, Todd. And here we go. Let
freedom
ring.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, look at that.
It's pretty good.